You clicked on this video for a reason. Maybe your doctor just told you your blood sugar is too high. Maybe you've been living with type 2 diabetes for years, and you're tired of feeling like food is your enemy. Or maybe someone you love is dealing with this, and you're trying to figure out how to help them eat better without taking away every single thing they enjoy. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know you made the right call, because what we're going to talk about today could genuinely change the way you think about vegetables, about blood sugar, and about what's actually possible when it comes to managing diabetes after 60. Here's the thing most people never hear: the fear of vegetables, especially root vegetables, the ones that grow underground, has been wildly exaggerated. For years, diabetics have been told to stay away from anything starchy, anything sweet, anything that grows below the soil. And so people end up eating the same 3 vegetables over and over, feeling deprived, eventually giving up on healthy eating altogether because it feels like punishment rather than nourishment. That's not right. That's not based on the full picture. And today, we're going to fix that. I want to start with a question though, and I want you to hold on to it until the very end of this video, because the answer is going to surprise you. The question is this: why do 2 vegetables with almost identical sugar content produce completely different blood sugar responses in your body? The answer has to do with something that most diabetes education materials barely mention. And once you understand it, you'll never look at your plate the same way again. I've spent years working through the research on blood sugar, insulin sensitivity, and aging metabolism. I've read through hundreds of clinical studies, nutritional analyses, and patient outcome reports, specifically focused on adults over 60, because the research shows clearly that our bodies respond differently to food as we age, and generic advice designed for 30-year-olds simply doesn't apply. What I'm sharing with you today is the result of that deep dive, distilled down to what actually matters, what you can actually use, starting tonight at dinner. Before we dive in, if you're finding this useful, take 2 seconds right now. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video, and give this a thumbs up. It genuinely helps more people like you find this content. And drop a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. I'd love to know where our community is tuning in from around the world. Hold on a second. Before we go any further, I've put something together for you. It's called the Glucose Paradox. It's a free guide on blood sugar and diabetes, and you can grab it for free through the link in the description. I'm telling you this now because I want you to finish this video with a concrete tool in your hands. To get it right away, just click the link in the description, head over to my site, and drop your email. You'll receive the guide in your inbox a few minutes later. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's get back to the video. Let's start by addressing the myth directly, because it needs to be dismantled before anything else will make sense. The idea that diabetics must avoid all starchy vegetables, all root vegetables, everything that grows underground, it comes from a simplistic reading of one concept: glycemic index. The glycemic index measures how quickly a food raises blood sugar when eaten in isolation, on an empty stomach, in a standardized laboratory setting. And for years, that single number was used as the basis for dietary advice for millions of diabetics. But here's what that number doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you what happens when you eat that food with protein. It doesn't account for fiber content. It doesn't factor in cooking method. And critically, it doesn't reflect what researchers now call glycemic load, which is a far more accurate measure of how a real meal, eaten by a real person, actually affects blood sugar in the real world. The reason this matters so much is that many of the vegetables that have been blacklisted for diabetics, sweet potatoes, carrots, beets, turnips, have moderate glycemic index scores that, when contextualized with their fiber content, their micronutrient profile, and their role within a balanced meal, produce blood sugar effects that are genuinely supportive of glucose control, not harmful, supportive. The research supports this, and it's time more people knew it. So let's go through the 7 best vegetables for diabetics, one by one, with real numbers and real explanations. The first one is sweet potatoes, and if you've been avoiding these out of fear, I want you to reconsider. A standard russet potato, the kind used for baking or French fries, has a glycemic index of around 85. That's high. That's the kind of number that spikes blood sugar quickly and dramatically. But a sweet potato? The glycemic index is approximately 44. Less than half. Why the difference? Fiber, primarily. Sweet potatoes are rich in both soluble and insoluble fiber, and that fiber acts like a physical barrier in your digestive tract, slowing the rate at which glucose is absorbed into your bloodstream. Instead of a sharp spike, you get a slow, steady rise that your body can manage far more effectively. Sweet potatoes are also one of the richest sources of beta-carotene, the precursor to vitamin A, among all vegetables. And emerging research suggests that vitamin A status plays a role in pancreatic function and insulin production. A medium-sized sweet potato roasted in the oven with a drizzle of olive oil and a pinch of rosemary is not only safe for most diabetics, it's genuinely beneficial. The second vegetable on this list is carrots, and they're one of the most misunderstood foods in diabetes nutrition. Here's what people get wrong about carrots. They hear sweet and assume dangerous. They see the bright orange color and assume high sugar, but the glycemic index of a raw carrot is approximately 16. That is extraordinarily low. Even cooked carrots, which have broken down some of their cellular structure, making glucose slightly more accessible, come in at around 39. That is still a low glycemic index food. The reason carrots perform so well is their extraordinary soluble fiber content. Soluble fiber dissolves in water and forms a thick gel in your gut that physically slows the movement of glucose into your bloodstream. It also feeds beneficial gut bacteria, which we now know are directly connected to insulin sensitivity. A gut microbiome that is diverse and well-fed produces short-chain fatty acids that improve the way your cells respond to insulin. Carrots, eaten regularly, contribute to that process. They're also dense with antioxidants, not just beta-carotene, but also lutein and polyacetylenes that reduce the chronic inflammation that makes insulin resistance worse over time. The third vegetable is one most people over 60 haven't thought much about: turnips. Turnips have been a staple of traditional cooking for centuries, and then somewhere along the way, they fell out of fashion. That's a shame, because for diabetics specifically, turnips are remarkable. Their glycemic index is approximately 30. Their caloric density is very low, and their fiber content is substantial. 1 cup of cooked turnips contains only about 36 calories, while delivering meaningful amounts of vitamin C, potassium, and glucosinolates, compounds that have been studied for their potential anti-inflammatory effects. From a practical standpoint, turnips are one of the best low-glycemic substitutes for potatoes. You can mash them. They have a mild, slightly peppery flavor that many people find very satisfying. You can roast them until they develop a caramelized edge. You can add them to soups and stews where they absorb the surrounding flavors beautifully. If you've never incorporated turnips into your weekly cooking, this is the moment to start. The fourth vegetable is onions, and this one might genuinely surprise you. Onions are not typically thought of as a blood sugar management tool. They're a flavor base, a cooking staple, something you add to everything without thinking about it as medicine. But their glycemic index is around 10, making them one of the lowest glycemic vegetables in existence. And beyond the glycemic number, onions contain a compound called quercetin that has been studied extensively in the context of diabetes. Quercetin is a flavonoid, a class of plant-based antioxidants, and multiple clinical trials have demonstrated that it improves insulin sensitivity, reduces fasting blood glucose, and decreases markers of systemic inflammation. Inflammation, as we now understand it, is not just a side effect of poorly controlled diabetes, it's a driver of insulin resistance itself. The more inflamed your tissues are, the harder it is for insulin to do its job. Quercetin helps interrupt that cycle. It's also worth noting that onions are prebiotic. They feed beneficial gut bacteria in the same way fiber does, so their effect on the microbiome adds another layer of benefit. Raw onions deliver more quercetin than cooked ones, but either way, using onions generously in your cooking is genuinely good medicine. The fifth vegetable is garlic, and here we have perhaps the most clinically documented item on this entire list. Garlic has been used as a medicinal food for thousands of years, across dozens of cultures, and the modern research has given us a clearer picture of exactly why. The active compound in garlic is allicin. It's what's responsible for garlic's distinctive smell, and it's also what appears to be responsible for many of its metabolic benefits. Multiple randomized controlled trials have demonstrated that regular garlic consumption can reduce fasting blood glucose by 10 to 15% in people with type 2 diabetes. That is a clinically meaningful reduction. It's also been shown to improve lipid profiles, reducing LDL cholesterol and triglycerides while supporting HDL, which matters enormously for diabetics, who face significantly elevated cardiovascular risk. Allicin is most potent when garlic is crushed or chopped and allowed to sit for a few minutes before cooking, as this activates the enzyme that produces it. 2 to 3 cloves daily, incorporated into meals rather than taken as a supplement, appears to be the most effective approach based on current evidence. The sixth vegetable requires a bit more nuance. Beets. Beets have a higher glycemic index than most of the other vegetables on this list, approximately 64, and their natural sugar content means portion control genuinely matters here. Half a cup is the right serving. But here's why beets belong on a diabetic-friendly vegetable list despite that number. They are one of the best dietary sources of inorganic nitrates, compounds that your body converts into nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a molecule that signals the smooth muscle in the walls of your blood vessels to relax, allowing them to dilate. For people with diabetes, this is critically important. Diabetes causes significant damage to blood vessels over time, leading to elevated blood pressure, reduced circulation, and increased risk of heart attack and stroke. The nitrates in beets actively counteract that process. Studies have shown that regular beet consumption measurably reduces systolic blood pressure and improves blood flow to peripheral tissues, including the feet and hands, which are particularly vulnerable to diabetic vascular complications. Eaten in controlled portions, as part of a balanced meal with protein and non-starchy vegetables, beets can be part of a genuinely healthy diabetic diet. The seventh vegetable is one that's often confused with sweet potatoes, but is an entirely different plant, the true yam. Not the orange-fleshed sweet potato that American grocery stores sometimes label as yam, but the actual yam, a starchy tuber that originates in Africa and Asia and is commonly found in Caribbean, West African, and Latin American cooking. True yams have a glycemic index of approximately 54, which puts them in the moderate range. They are rich in potassium, important for blood pressure regulation, and they contain a type of resistant starch that resists digestion in the small intestine and instead travels to the colon, where it acts as a prebiotic. This resistant starch has been specifically studied for its role in improving insulin sensitivity over time. Unlike rapidly digestible starches that spike blood sugar, resistant starch slows glucose absorption and feeds gut bacteria in ways that support metabolic health. If you have access to true yams at your local market, they're worth adding to your rotation. Now let me come back to the question I asked at the beginning. Why do two vegetables with almost identical sugar content produce completely different blood sugar responses? The answer is fiber architecture. The physical structure of the fiber within a vegetable, whether it's soluble or insoluble, how tightly it's wound around the starch granules, how resistant it is to the enzymes in your digestive tract, determines how quickly the sugars within that vegetable enter your bloodstream. A beet and a piece of white bread might contain similar grams of sugar, but the fiber matrix of the beet physically constrains how fast that sugar is released. The white bread has almost no fiber architecture at all. That's why context, the whole food, not just the sugar content, is everything. And there are 3 principles that apply across every single one of these 7 vegetables that will determine whether they help or hurt your blood sugar management. The first is portion awareness, not obsessive calorie counting, but having a general sense of what a reasonable serving looks like. A medium sweet potato, half a cup of beets, a cup of cooked carrots. These are real, satisfying amounts of food that fit comfortably within a blood sugar conscious diet. The second principle is preparation. Roasting, steaming, or baking these vegetables preserves their nutritional integrity and avoids the blood sugar spikes that come from frying or adding sugary sauces. The third, and perhaps most important, principle is meal composition. Never eat these vegetables alone. Always pair them with a source of protein: chicken, fish, eggs, tofu, legumes, and a source of healthy fat, whether that's olive oil, avocado, or nuts. That combination dramatically slows gastric emptying, flattens the blood sugar curve, and keeps you feeling satisfied for hours rather than hungry again 30 minutes later. Variety, it turns out, is not just about enjoying food more, though that matters enormously for long-term adherence to a healthy diet. Variety also reduces your risk of micronutrient deficiencies that make diabetes harder to manage. Chromium, magnesium, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin A, all of these micronutrients play direct roles in glucose metabolism and insulin function. A diet that rotates through many different vegetables ensures you're getting the full spectrum of what your body needs to keep blood sugar in check and protect against the complications that poorly controlled diabetes brings over time. This isn't about perfection. It's not about eating the same 7 vegetables forever and never enjoying anything else. It's about expanding what you believe is possible and knowing that the foods that have been labeled off limits for you may not be off limits at all. With the right knowledge, the right portions, and the right meal structure, you have far more options than you've been led to believe. And hey, if you made it all the way here, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button to let me know this was worth your time. And leave a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. Seriously, I read every single one, and it means a lot to see how far this community reaches. You know what the problem is with diabetes and high blood sugar? Most people find out way too late, and by the time they do, they have no idea where to even start. That's why I decided to create a free guide. It's called the Glucose Paradox, and inside, you'll find everything you wish you'd known sooner. I'll explain how blood sugar actually works, and why your body sometimes reacts the exact opposite way you'd expect. That's why it's called a paradox. I've also included concrete habits you can start changing right now, even if you know zero about nutrition or medicine. It's free. You can download it in a second. And it might be the single most useful thing you do for your health today. Just click the link in the description to head to the site, drop your email, and get the guide sent straight to you. Don't put this off.